What am I trying to say here? What word am I thinking of here? This freaking video. This sucks so bad. This is so terrible. Hello everyone and welcome back to 3WP. This is the March 2nd edition of AEW Dynamite on TBS. Will they be able to rebound from the absolute dumpster fire that was last week's episode? What is President Tony Khan's huge announcement? Let's find out together. From Daly's Place in Jacksonville, Florida, this is AEW Dynamite, and this is the world's worst wrestling podcast. We start out the show. No need to hesitate any longer. Tony Khan has been teasing for the better part of a week now on a major announcement that he was going to make on this week's Dynamite. We got the spoiler that it wasn't going to be a talent signing, so sorry, no Bray Wyatt, no Braun Strowman, no contract renewal for Cody Rhodes. We get Tony Schiavone in the ring with AEW President Tony Khan. Tony takes the microphone and he is not a very good public speaker. He stumbles over his words quite a bit. He seems to get confused in his train of thought. Also, he's completely wide-eyed for the entirety of this segment, which makes you kind of think that he might be a little bit coked out, almost. Tony can finally pull it together enough to form a cognitive sentence and tell us that he has purchased Ring of Honor Wrestling. For those of you that don't know, Ring of Honor is probably like the third biggest promotion in the world right now besides AEW and WWE. They were a company that started the careers of or gave exposure to Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Hangman Page. Basically the better part of the main event scene in both companies at this point. What's critical about this purchase as well is that Ring of Honor actually owns the rights to AEW's Spiritual Beginning, which is the All-In pay-per-view, which took place in Chicago. Now that Tony Khan has purchased Ring of Honor, he now owns the rights to the footage for that show. So he basically now owns the genesis of AEW. Ring of Honor has been on hiatus since October of last year, and that basically ended the contracts of all of their contracted wrestlers. So Tony doesn't get really any of the talent in this purchase, but he does get the video library, which is huge because we're talking about 15 plus years of matches involving the aforementioned CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, all those classic matches, the beginning of these big stars' careers. Now Tony Khan has that video library. To kick off the show proper, we have a one-on-one match between two of Ring of Honor's originals, the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, taking on the Fallen Angel, Christopher Daniels. The first time that we have seen Daniels in an AEW ring in quite some time. He's had an eye injury and has been out of action for, I think, the better part of half of a year now. But for this event, for Tony Khan purchasing Ring of Honor, I thought it was nice for them to bring Daniels back in to have this one-on-one match with Bryan. They start out with the Code of Honor, which is a handshake before the match, which is, of course, customary for all Ring of Honor matches to start and end with. Daniels seems to be in pretty good shape still. He is wearing kind of a singlet. You can tell he's got maybe a little bit of extra meat in his midsection, but still, he's 51 years old and he's still in there hanging with Bryan Danielson, who's at the top of his game right now. We get a series of chain wrestling from the two mat veterans, followed up by another handshake, a show of respect. We get a moonsault by Christopher Daniels to the outside, which he lands perfectly. He then poses to the camera, gives up a 5 and a 1, showing everybody that he is 51 years old and he still apparently has it. I hate to say that because of that really annoying chant, but Daniels looked very good in this match, as you would expect, especially when he's working with somebody who's as good as Bryan Danielson at this point. Back in the ring, Danielson takes over and starts working some submissions. He locks in a bow and arrow, which Danielson breaks. We see Bryan block an attempt of Daniels to hit the Angel's wings. Bryan reverses it into a German suplex. He then hits his corner drop kick Later on, Daniels attempts a Hurricane Rana off the top rope, which Bryan pushes him off in midair, so he essentially just does a moonsault to the floor. Looked really cool. A lot of things could have gone wrong, I think, in that sequence, but again, both of these two are so smooth and they're so crisp. They're obvious ring veterans, and I think that if there's two people who are going to do that spot, it would be Danielson and Christopher Daniels. The finish of the match sees Daniels attempt the BME, the best moonsault ever, which Bryan gets his knees up and blocks. He locks in a triangle and hits repeated elbow strikes to the top of Daniels' head until he eventually passes out, making Bryan the winner by referee stoppage. Bryan gets on the mic after the match and states that every match in Ring of Honor starts and ends with a handshake, and he begins to shake the limp hand of Christopher Daniels before stating that he's not in Ring of Honor anymore, he's in AEW, and grabs the other of Daniels' hands and starts to stomp his head in. He goes on to call out Jon Moxley, saying that the head that's going to be stomped in at Revolution will be Moxley's. This, of course, brings out Jon Moxley. He enters through the crowd, gets in the ring, and cuts kind of a by the letters promo. He talks about walking through fire and bullets and doesn't really say a whole lot in here. The basic gist of what he's trying to say is that he cannot be stopped from taking out Bryan at Revolution, and he offers Bryan a free shot. Bryan locks back to throw a punch, but then rolls out of the ring like a sneaky heel. This was a nice finish to this segment. I thought overall this was a great match, and it was nice to see Christopher Daniels get back in the ring. We get a pre-tape promo with Sting and Darby Allin in the locker room area. Sting kind of mumbles through his portion of this promo. He seemed like he was half asleep, and Darby also didn't add much energy to this as well. That's kind of Darby's style. The overall message of this segment was that regardless of what happens in their TNT championship match between Sammy and Darby, they still have to focus on their trios tag team match at Revolution against the AHFO. The next match is a 15-team casino tag team battle royale, which is essentially the same thing that they did last week, only with 5 more teams. So they took the concept of that absolute cluster of a match that took place at the beginning of the show last week and said, we're going to add 5 more teams to this thing, and expected to come out any different, which it didn't. The match started with FTR and Top Flight, the returning Darius Martin and his brother Dante. This is the first time we have seen Darius in a year, as he has been out with injury, and Dante has gone on kind of a nice singles run, mostly on Rampage and on their YouTube shows. The two teams just started fighting, and unless I missed it, at no point did any of the announcers explain the rules. I didn't know if this was going to be a gauntlet match starting out. At one point, I believe Tony Schiavone had mentioned that the competitors must go over the top rope with both feet hitting the floor, so it is Battle Royal rules, but at no point did they really describe how the match was going to go. At some point, just a clock showed up for a countdown, and the next team came out. So from then on, I was kind of able to decipher that this was just going to be a Royal Rumble, but instead of single competitors, you have tag teams coming in at 90-second intervals. So this match had every single team from the 10-team Battle Royal from last week, with the exception of Red Dragon, because they of course won, so now they're on to join the triple threat for the tag team championships at Revolution. So they have an additional 6 teams from the teams that competed last week. I'll go over the teams again quickly. The third team to enter was the Acclaimed, and the Dark Order team of Allen Angels and 10. The Butcher and the Blade, the Varsity Blondes of Griff Garrison and Brian Pillman Jr. Bear Country, Santana and Ortiz. The Best Friends of Trent Beretta and Chuck Taylor. A second Dark Order team of Stu Grayson and Evil Uno. The Young Bucks, Ryan Nemeth and Peter Avalon. The Gun Club, Brock Anderson and Shoddy Lee Johnson. Brock Anderson, of course, being the son of Arn Anderson, who looks exactly like him, just like Billy Gunn's kids. And lastly is 2.0, who actually, they clear the ring out a little bit before they come out, so we don't have all 30 competitors in the ring at the same time. I'm not going to go over a lot of the action because for the most part the ring filled up before anybody really got to be eliminated. So we just ended up again with just a big hodgepodge of people fighting around each other, tripping over each other, ganging up in the corner and huddling around. Not really a whole lot of action going on. We get another stare down between the Young Bucks and FTR while the Young Bucks are making their entrance. Cash actually goes and starts to hold the ropes for the Young Bucks for them to get into the ring. They get face to face in the center of the ring and immediately gets broken up as all the rest of the competitors jump them from behind. So we're still teasing this match apparently. I feel like I could almost do a copy and paste of my notes from last week, as this is all just the same stuff going on and on again. We get another stupid apron spot where Evil Uno and Trent both go over the top rope, but they fight on the apron. They start throwing forearms at one another. They start posing, and Evil Uno does an eye poke onto Trent. Why won't you just get back in the ring? Why are you posing on the apron? You're in risk of being eliminated. Just get through the ropes. We get another cameo from Danhausen in this match as he slides out from under the ring and points at Evil Uno to put a curse on him. That's Danhausen's kind of catchphrase. This would be one thing if Danhausen was just in there by himself, if he was the only like crazy gimmick in this whole match. But he's in there with Dark Order, who are all painted up, and one of them's in a gimp suit and a gimp mask, and it's just too much. Again, if everybody looks like a crazy person, then you don't have any crazy people. If everybody on your roster is 7 feet tall, then you don't have any giants. There's nothing but weird talent doing weird things and making absolutely no sense whatsoever in the grand scheme of winning the match. Off the distraction from Danhausen, Trent eliminates Evil Uno. We get another verbal eye rolling from Jim Ross when he just says, he cursed him. You could tell when Jim Ross, just in the inflection of his voice, is just absolutely fed up with some of the segments and some of the people involved in this show. And I don't blame him at this point. We get another callback from last week in a different match where 10 of the Dark Order is hanging on the apron, and Santana of Proud and Powerful starts to pull at his mask to get him to let go of the rope so he can eliminate him. This is revisited from last week where Ricky Starks started to pull on his mask to get him to let go of his full Nelson. So apparently 10 is just a big dumb idiot, and he doesn't realize he needs to tie his mask on tighter. I would say this buries 10, but he's already part of the Dark Order, which is just a ridiculous team. Nobody expects anything from him, so he can't really go much lower at this point. Towards the end of the match, we see Dax Harwood from FTR get knocked over the top rope. He manages to hang on and stay on the apron. Although, while he's out on the apron, Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish from Red Dragon sneak down and distract him. So again, rather than just get back in the ring and avoid elimination, Dax turns around and starts to point at Red Dragon, telling him, hey, don't touch me, leave me alone, and turns around into a double super kick from the Young Bucks for FTR to be eliminated from this match. And this sucked! This absolutely sucked! Second week in a row, the best tag team in the world, making them look like the biggest bunch of idiots. I don't know what else I can say here. I don't know what other dissection of this match that I can do. It's awful. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. The match ultimately comes down to Darius Martin of Top Flight and Matt Jackson of the Young Bucks. You see Darius go over the top rope, but he lands on the apron. He locks on to Matt Jackson for a suplex, picks him up over the top rope, and then sets him on the apron. Doesn't dump him to the floor to win the match. Sets him down on the apron so that the match can continue, and they can trade more fake-looking forearms with one another. At one point, Darius is on top of Matt and just forearming him onto the canvas over and over again, rather than just pushing him off the apron and winning the match, or getting back into the ring himself so he doesn't get eliminated. The match ends with a low blow from Matt Jackson onto Darius Martin and a super kick off of the apron for the win. So the Young Bucks advance to the Triple Threat Tag Team Championship match at Revolution. They will face Red Dragon and Jurassic Express. This match nearly broke me. This was all the worst tendencies of AEW rolled into one. Too many people. Too much nonsensical stuff going on. Repeated spots from last week's match, which still don't make any sense this week. Outside interference in a battle royal. People doing obviously fake things. Fighting on an apron when you can easily get back into the ring and avoid elimination. This sucked! I try not to be too negative in my critiques of things. I try to look for the good in most matches. There was no good in this match. There was nothing for me to hang my hat on. There was nothing to redeem this in my eyes. This was awful. Stop doing these big, stupid, multi-man matches where nothing happens. We get a backstage segment with Chris Jericho where he hypes up his match with Eddie Kingston for Revolution. He says that Eddie finally has the chance to win the big one, but he doubts that he will. You see Santana and Ortiz come up to Jericho during this interview. First 2 weeks ago, Santana and Ortiz had their match against Chris Jericho and Jake Hager, so that seemed to be them leaving the inner circle, but then they just come up and fist bump Jericho, and it seems like they're fine now. We'll have to see how this plays out at the pay-per-view. We get an in-ring segment with CM Punk. He enters to no real fanfare. He has a plain white t-shirt on rather than any of his own merchandise. He looks sullen. He looks very serious. He doesn't interact with the crowd whatsoever, simply walks to the ring and grabs the microphone. He ponders to himself if he is the bad guy in this situation with MJF. If he drove MJF to do these things, but then he does question MJF's sincerity in the words that he spoke and goes on to mention all the terrible things that MJF has done throughout his career in AEW. Punk wonders aloud if he is like Dr. Frankenstein. Did he create this monster? He invites MJF to the ring so that they can have a conversation about the things that MJF had said last week. MJF comes out in an all-white suit, which is pretty obvious symbolism there. Punk goes on to tell MJF that he had also done some terrible things in his career, but if Max keeps up with the path that he's on, all that hate that he's got bottled up inside is going to burn him up. Punk says that he wakes up every morning and tries his best to be the good guy and offers a handshake to MJF. MJF pushes his hand aside and gives Punk a big old hug. Punk hesitates for a moment, wondering if he can really trust MJF, but then eventually does embrace MJF back. The two part for a moment. MJF kind of gives him a loving pat on the chest, and then promptly kicks him right in the balls. He removes his white coat and as well as the button-down shirt that he was wearing underneath to reveal that he is wearing a white t-shirt as well, only his has a printed picture of the infamous photograph of a 14-year-old MJF with CM Punk at the autograph signing that they have been referencing throughout this program. Very nice serial killer stalker vibe here from MJF with the t-shirt. We see the Pinnacle come down to the ring. Shawn Spears gives MJF his Dynamite diamond ring, which he uses to punch Punk in the face. And FTR holds off security while MJF and Spears take a dog collar, put it around Punk's neck, and throw the chain over the top rope, essentially hanging him off of the side of the ring. At this point, Punk is bleeding and his blood is going all over his nice plain white shirt, as well as all over MJF's plain white clothing. Great visual here of the bright red blood on the white clothing. This is old school Memphis style wrestling. MJF tells Punk that he is the devil, which is the cue for Spears to start pulling on the chain in the ring, essentially starting to choke Punk like a noose. This only goes on for a few seconds though, as Sting, Darby Allin, and Sammy Guevara run out to make the save and chase off the heels. I have written here, how are this segment and the tag team battle royal on the same show? At this point, we're about halfway through the show, but it's so schizophrenic in nature. We have this great opening match between Bryan Danielson and Christopher Daniels, and we go to that absolute train wreck of the tag team battle royal, which they should have just burned the tape on that. Just delete it. Don't ever show that to the public again. And then we go to this emotional, bloody, real segment between MJF and CM Punk. This is professional wrestling. This is an angle done the proper way. This is how you get people to invest. This is how you get people to buy tickets. This is the best rivalry in any company at this point in pro wrestling. The fact that this had followed the Tag Team Battle Royal almost made me even more angry at how bad that segment was, because this was so good, and if I was CM Punk and MJF, I would be livid to have this segment on the same show as that absolute abomination. Get a women's tag match featuring Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and Jamie Hayter versus Mercedes Martinez and Thunder Rosa. I love Mercedes Martinez. I'm glad to see that she is on TV regularly again. I think she's probably one of the best female workers in the business right now. The heel team of Baker and Hayter jumpstart the match. They run to the outside to fight Mercedes and Thunder Rosa. In the ring, we get big person collision spots between Mercedes and Hayter, both of them trying to one-up the other to show how much stronger they are. Later in the match, we see Rebel, who's Britt Baker's assistant, pull Thunder Rosa's leg in clear view of the referee. He sees her do it, and she also holds on to it for added effect. And he just sits there and stares at her. Doesn't start counting. Doesn't call for a disqualification because that's outside interference. Doesn't kick Rebel out of ringside for interfering in the match. He just lets her go, and all is forgiven. She can stay right there and continue to interfere in this match. This is a reoccurring issue with AEW referees. They have no authority, and there's another blatant example of it later on in the finish of this match. The heels work over Mercedes Martinez, and she gets a kind of a cold tag to Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker have kind of a sloppy exchange with forearms and strikes that really aren't connecting. She hits a Death Valley driver on Britt Baker, but Jamie Hayter breaks up the pin at 2. The action breaks out into a 4-way as all 4 women are just fighting in the ring freely. Again, the official not counting any of them out, not trying to get them out of the ring. Eventually, Mercedes Martinez and Jamie Hayter kind of just fall out of the ring together. Thunder Rosa picks up Britt Baker and hits her finish, the Fire Thunder Driver, and pins the AEW Women's Champion right in the middle of the ring. Kind of a flat finish. There wasn't really a whole lot of lead up to that. There was just kind of the big schmoz between the 4 women, and then Thunder Rosa just hit her finish for the win. Doesn't really add a whole lot of intrigue for their championship match at the pay-per-view, considering we just saw the number 1 contender just pin the champion. Why couldn't she pin Jamie Hayter in this tag match if you wanted Thunder Rosa to win? Jamie Hayter's taken a lot of losses for somebody who's supposed to be the big bad muscle for the women's champion. In a backstage interview with Tay Conti with Anna Jay, Alex Marvez starts putting over Tay with all of her accomplishments, all of her martial arts background. Of course, before Tay can say anything in her interview, she gets interrupted by Jade Cargill and Mark Sterling. Jade, of course, has to swear when she comes in, and they basically say nothing and kind of just make mean faces at each other. This was really a nothing segment. It didn't really add anything to build up for their TBS championship match at Revolution. Dueling pre-taped interviews between Chris Statlander and legit Layla Hirsch. Both ladies recite pretty bad rehearsed lines. Neither one of these women are particularly good actors or particularly good talkers, and it really shows in these segments. They're both kind of robotic and, again, don't really say a whole lot. Next match is Wardlow versus Cesar Bononi. Of course, Wardlow is MJF's hired muscle. He's gone on a run recently where he's just basically squashing all of his opponents, just hits them with power bombs and pins them easily. And this match was no different. Wardlow hits 3 power bombs and pins Cesar with his foot on his chest. Wardlow's gotten a lot of comparisons to Batista in terms of how he's been booked and his overall look and aesthetic. And I would say that's fair. We'll have to see how Wardlow does when he goes out on his own and become a babyface and strike out on his own. So I'm interested to see what happens here with Wardlow. I think he looks great. We'll have to see how he does in longer matches where he's just not killing guys. But again, this is how you get somebody over. This is how you establish somebody as a big killer. You give them convincing wins on TV, and you do it often. After the match, Shawn Spears goes to strike Cesar Bononi with the chair, as he has done for several weeks now to Wardlow's victims. Wardlow, though, stops him. They have a brief stare down, and Spears backs down from Wardlow like the big coward that he is. Get a rundown of the upcoming matches for Rampage and Revolution. I did notice that JR and Tony Schiavone would alternate in announcing some of these, so Excalibur doesn't have to go through them like the Roadrunner on speed again, like he did last week. The poor guy can actually take a breath. We get a pre-taped spooky vignette with the House of Black. They deliver some really cryptic lines where they finish each other's sentences. They don't really say a whole lot, and the segment just ends. This didn't really do a whole lot. The backstage interaction between Wardlow and MJF, where MJF basically tells Wardlow that he doesn't believe he's going to win the Face of the Revolution ladder match. Wardlow finally comes back, saying that maybe he would win more matches if he wasn't helping MJF win all the time, which MJF responds to with slapping Wardlow in the face. He reminds Wardlow that he doesn't work for AEW, Wardlow works for him. They get a nice close-up of Wardlow, who gets a little smile on his face as he's kind of rubbing his face, licking his chops. I would say it's most likely that Wardlow turns on MJF and turns babyface at the pay-per-view, but we'll have to wait and see. The main event of the evening is a 6-person tag match featuring Adam Cole and Red Dragon versus the team of the Dark Order's Alex Reynolds and John Silver with the AEW champion Hangman Adam Page. Page and the Dark Order members make their entrance together. Reynolds and Silver have also dressed up like cowboys in homage to their good friend, the Hangman. Page can pull off this look. He's a larger guy. He looks kind of like a cowboy, but Reynolds and Silver look like they're little kids dressing up for Halloween. The start of the match sees Cole and Page facing off in the ring, but then Cole sneaks back into his corner and tags in Bobby Fish to start the match. The heels work over Alex Reynolds, who again just gets a cold tag to Adam Page. He gets worked over a bit by the heels teaming up on him, but eventually makes his own comeback, sets up for the buckshot, and all three heels dive out of the ring. Page hits a nice pop-up powerbomb onto Kyle O'Reilly. A 3-way sloppy hockey fight between all 6 combatants in the match, which results in Page hitting a lariat on Cole. As he's falling into the corner, though, Alex Reynolds makes a blind tag on Page and enters the ring to face off against Adam Cole. Cole eventually gets the better of Reynolds and hits the boom, which is his knee to the back of the head, and also one of the worst named finishers in pro wrestling today. Come up with a better name, Adam. This allows Cole to pin Alex Reynolds for the win. Cole and Red Dragon beat down Adam Page on a 3-on-1. They duct tape his hands to the ring ropes and make him watch as they hit their finishers on Silver and Reynolds. Cole hits a couple of super kicks on Page, who is restrained in the ropes. He grabs the AEW championship, puts it on Page's shoulders, saying that it's going to belong to Cole at the pay-per-view. Cole and Red Dragon pose to end the show with Adam Page restrained in the background. I thought in a vacuum this was the right result for this match. You want the heel to have some heat going into the pay-per-view. You want the babyface to get revenge not only for what the heel's done to him, but also what he's done to his friends. The only issue is that I don't take Adam Cole seriously. I don't see him as a threat. I don't see him as a world champion in this company yet. I touched on this last week. They haven't done anything to make me believe that Adam Cole should be their next world champion. And who knows? I might be wrong. They might have him beat Adam Page. But at this point, with the way they presented him on television, They're more concerned about the interpersonal things between him and Red Dragon and he and the Young Bucks. Overall, this was a roller coaster ride of an episode of AEW Dynamite. We started out strong. I think it's very interesting the fact that Tony Khan now owns Ring of Honor. He has that media library. He can put together whatever footage out of that he wants. Maybe he might put all the matches up on a streaming service. You never know. So I think it's very interesting that Tony Khan now owns the media library for the third biggest wrestling company in North America. Of course, going on from the announcement, we had the match between Bryan Danielson and Christopher Daniels. This was a very good Ring of Honor style match between two of basically the founding members of Ring of Honor. Like I mentioned in last week's video, Danielson's on a different level right now. He's probably the best wrestler in the world. And it was great to see Christopher Daniels back out there, especially when they're celebrating Ring of Honor and kind of introducing Ring of Honor to this audience with this type of a match. And of course, we go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows with the 15-team tag team battle royale. I'm going to try not to lose my temper again with this, but my lord, I can't take any more of these matches. These multi-man matches with 20 plus people in it. There's just no reason to do these. Nobody looks good coming out of matches like this. It's visually boring to watch. There's no action. There's just people huddled in corners everywhere. And the way this and the Battle Royal from last week were booked, with everybody looking so stupid and not having any common sense to just get back in the ring. Just please stop booking these matches. You have to have everybody on the roster on every show. It's okay if they just stay home for the day. But what really grinds my gears and just drives me nuts about these whole situations is how FTR is being made to look in these two matches. Dax Harwood, one of the most respected tag team wrestlers of the modern generation, and 2 weeks in a row, he looks like an absolute moron. The way that FTR has been misused in this company is criminal, and I don't want to speculate or say that the Young Bucks are doing this purposely to make FTR look bad, because I don't know the ins and outs of AEW and who's making decisions now, but I know that the Young Bucks have an influence in the tag team division. So if they are doing this, if they are having some input in how Tony Khan puts together this tag team division, they need to stop and think about this for a minute, because nobody's going to care about your program with FTR if they look like a bunch of losers. Then in the bipolar nature of this program, we go right from the outhouse back up to the penthouse with the CM Punk and MJF segment. This is a pro wrestling angle perfection. This is old school methodology of trying to draw money, trying to get people emotionally invested in your product. It is now March, and I believe this is already going to be the rivalry of the year between MJF and CM Punk. These two are so good on the mic. They're so good in figuring out psychology and how to play with people's emotions. I can't wait to see this match. I honestly don't know who's going to win, which is great. That's really the idea in this day and age, is trying to put together matches that people can't automatically say, oh, this person's going to win. There's so much intrigue around this program, and I am absolutely loving it. Whoever's been putting together these segments, have them do more stuff on this show, because as we can see from that Battle Royal and the main event, this program overall needs help. I thought the women's tag match was okay. It didn't do a whole lot for me. Got a bit sloppy at times. Again, the officials letting people break the rules and not doing anything to enforce them. And also, I wouldn't have the challenger beat the champion clean in the middle of the ring on the program before the pay-per-view. I think that Jamie Hayter could have taken the loss here And it still would have made Thunder Rosa look strong. She could have gone into the pay-per-view with a win and some momentum. Low match, while being pretty much the same match that he's had for the past few weeks, I think is still good. You're putting him over strong. You're making him look more and more like a beast. And the more that he power bombs people and the more that he absolutely kills his opponents, the more the fans are getting behind him. So that is really good in terms of organically making him a babyface in the future. And also now you can see that he's starting to rebel a bit against Spears and also against MJF. When he ultimately turns on MJF, I think he's going to get just a huge reaction from the fans. It's going to be, again, similar to when Batista turned on Triple H. A lot of the pre-tapes and the vignettes in this episode didn't really do a whole lot for me. The House of Black, they weren't really saying a whole lot. The Statlander and Layla Hirsch segment, they were just scripted, rehearsed lines, and neither lady was really pulling them off that well. And then Jericho also basically just reiterated what he was saying from last week, which isn't a bad thing. The main event, I thought all the in-ring action was good. Reynolds and Silver are good wrestlers. They just look so ridiculous in their Dark Order get-ups. They just look so indie. They look like they just came from your local nothing federation that runs an armory and draws 50 people on a Friday night. Adam Page looks like a star. It just remains to be seen if he can really reach that top level of actually being like a legitimate world champion. Red Dragon are awesome. O'Reilly is still spectacular in the ring. Fish is great. I really like Adam Cole. I just don't think he's been built up enough to be a serious contender for their top championship. So that really took me out of this tag team match. And that doesn't really make me excited to see their title match at the pay-per-view. I feel like of pretty much all the matches going into Revolution, this is the one that I can pick the winner for sure. And as I said with the CM Punk and MJF angle, you don't want these matches to be predictable. You don't want the fans to flat out know who's going to win. So I think that having Cole involved in these storylines with Red Dragon and him being torn between them and the Bucks, I think is really taken away with this program from Page, with the focus should be on the title and not the interpersonal play between him and these two teams. So that will do it for this week's AEW Dynamite. 2 very good segments in an overall stinker of a show. Will they get better next week? Will I pop a blood vessel in my forehead? Will they try and get 40 guys in a tag team match? You'll have to tune in and see. Until next time, I would like to thank you all very much for watching. If you could go ahead and hit the subscribe button, it helps support my channel, helps me grow a little bit, and I'd really much appreciate it. So until next time, I have been Paul, and you have been watching the world's worst wrestling podcast.